And you've just heard High Time, taken from the Nimbus Sextet's second album, Forward Thinker, which is out now. And I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Nichols from the band. Hello, Joe.
Hello. Hi, Alistair. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. So what can you tell us about Forward Thinker?
Forward Thinker was somewhat a product of my mind during lockdown, but I feel like that only scratches the surface of what I was trying to convey through the album. I mean, actually, at its roots, it's quite conceptual, and the title track is the centerpiece of this concept. So the concept is essentially an exploration of how my mind works. So when I'm sort of in the process of making music or just kind of going about my musical career, I often get into a mindset where I just feel that I've driven forwards all the time. And my mind just says, you've got to keep on going, you've got to keep on doing things, you've got to work as hard as you can at all points, and just keep on driving through. And I sort of came to terms with that in 2020 when things all stopped. I would say it was there and I knew about it, but I really confronted it head on, and actually it sort of subconsciously came out almost like a process of osmosis in my music at that time. And I realized that what I was writing was drawing on the different places that my mind goes, and the emotion, that I experience while I write music, quite tangibly, is sort of shows that the emotions come out in the music, and it's almost like I can't stop them from doing that. But suffice to say that my mind gets into a place where I feel like I've got to move forwards, and that can be painful, but it can also be euphoric in equal measure. And that's, I think, due to the insecurities that we face as musicians. And the album really deals with all of these themes. High Time, which is the first track on the album, is about self-belief and challenging that feeling of not perhaps just, not knowing where you're going to go next, and to have faith in your path and your direction. That's what it's about. It's in the lyrics are encouraging a positive outlook. Forward thinkers, all the horn lines in that, and they dart around and dive. I like my mind cascading about as it deals with having to do with lots of different things and how I respond emotionally to that. And then towards the end of the album, the real meat of it is based on a trilogy, which starts with Search for Solace and then goes through to The Light, which is the final track on the album. And that really deals with how upsetting at points it can be to feel not necessarily directionless, but to feel really caught in the middle of such conflicting emotions. And I think to get to the root of that would require an essay on how I feel. But by the end of the trilogy, we move through the sort of darker recesses of my mind, and then when we get to The Light, we emerge into a much happier, more positive place, and it's a driving funk fusion tune. So that's the sort of moment of release where I maybe arrive at a happier place, and a place where I've realize I can move forwards knowing who I am. And I suppose it's illustrative of the journey I've taken in the last couple of years emotionally, being a professional musician and dealing with that, coming to terms with that, really.
Yeah, so I mean, that sounds like almost addressing what a lot of people felt in lockdown. It kind of gave a forced pause and people to consider how they were beforehand, when you're kind of forced to take stock almost.
Yes, I think that is something that has made music a lot richer in the last couple of years as well, and it's led to an introspective touch to a lot of artists' creative output. And I think when you imbue music with the necessary emotionality, that's imbuing it with humanity, and that makes music all the better for it. And that was certainly what I was trying to get at on the Forward Thinker album, was to really reach people and get them to connect with the conflicting feelings of pain and joy that come from being not only a musician and an artist, but come from being human.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And musically, it's a really diverse and ambitious album. Were you going for an album which kind of fused genres Because there's different styles on this.
Yes, no, I mean, I think over the years, I've always tried to keep as musically diverse as possible. I've never felt comfortable sticking in one place, having written all the music on this album, albeit with plenty of collaborative influence from the other musicians and the producer Wayne Dixon as well. I think with this one especially, I wanted to move beyond the sort of funk fusion side of things that I think the band maybe was starting to build a reputation for, and it's great that we've got that, Trapdoor, our first single on our first album, Dreams Fulfilled, really cemented, that is one of our core influences, and that's how the press kind of treated us in that way. But this time I wanted to bring in many more influences, hip hop influences, such as in High Time, dance influences in the title track, Forward Thinker, and more of my contemporary jazz influences. Nimbus was really a move for me in a much more contemporary jazz direction when I started the project in 2018. I had a band at university called Jamboree when I was in Edinburgh, which actually included Misha Stevens and Alex Palmer, the bassist and the drummer in Nimbus Sextet. But that was just much more of a funk, sort of party funk outfit, really. And it was great because I was still exploring my compositional style at that point as a younger man. And, it was enriching, but I knew when I started Nimbus Sextet that I wanted to move things in another direction. And the compositions, they're so episodic. Yeah. I'll stick with one theme and then I'll often just move it in another direction quite quickly because I want people to feel that the music's going on a journey and it's not going to be pigeonholed in one place. It's going to take you to different places. And once again, with Forward Thinker, I developed on that theme, which we established in the first album, but I really expanded outwards and brought many more influences to the table this time.
And you've got some amazing musicians on the album. You mentioned a couple already, but can you talk about some of them and what they bring to the sextet?
Sure. So within the band itself, the special telepathy I have is really with Misha Stevens and Alex Palmer, the bassist and the drummer. They are long-term collaborators of mine, and I think what makes us tick and what gives us our trademark sound, no matter where we're going and where we're exploring musically, is we're not read about music in a way. Like I've taught myself theory. I'm self-taught, as is Alex, as is Misha. We play by ear, and we very much play. We use our ear, to interplay between each other. And we've come from so many different backgrounds musically. Misha played in a West African drumming troupe while he was at Edinburgh University. Right. And Alex has played in everything from metal and reggae bands to contemporary jazz groups. So, we've built up a real language through gigging for over 7 or 8 years. Right. And that means that we have a very natural approach to sort of grooving with each other, and we know each other so well rhythmically, we can anticipate each other. So half the time someone can intimate a piece of rhythmic phrasing and then the other person will just catch on, or all of us will catch on to it very quickly. And that is really the gist of the Nimbus sound, comes from the three of us. But beyond that, I have fantastic horn players in the band. Michael Butcher, who's one of the top Scottish jazz saxophonists, I feel, excellent soloist, and just a really wonderful emotive tenor sax sound that he has. And we have Ewan Allardyce on trumpet, who's a wonderful trumpet player, is often complimented for a sweet tone. And Honza Karimsky is a recent addition on guitar, who's based in Edinburgh. He's a Czech guitar player, right, who has influences from bluegrass to funk and psychedelic rock. So everyone really has their own voices, and I think it's a maverick group of musicians who are guided by their ear, and that means that we have a very natural approach to melody and groove as far as writing is concerned, as approaching the music's concerned, and it can take the music in all sorts of directions for that reason. It's not sitting down and reading through scores, from start to finish. It's a musical exploration using our humanity to communicate with each other, I think.
So that sounds as though if people go to see you live, every night could be different. Every night's probably different.
Absolutely, and I want it to be that way because that's the essence of jazz, isn't it? It's getting to a ultimate improvisational core and a freedom of expression, and I think that's what I would always want to convey through music. I mean, we can pigeonhole jazz as being something that's elite and inaccessible, but if you can see on stage that the musicians are communicating with each other, that they're loving it, and that they're taking things in a very spontaneous and exciting direction, which I feel the best jazz always does, then that means it's authentic. That means it's real. And we strive in Nimbus Sextet to do that every time we play.
I completely agree with you. I've seen a lot of live jazz before lockdown stopped, everything like that. And that's part of the joy, to see people absolutely in tune with each other on stage and doing something that surprises them even at times.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I think, you want to be able to, I think music as a whole, that it kind of, jazz is situated better with the music as a whole if it does that, rather than be this esoteric thing. Every live gig is special for that reason, because you're communicating with your audience as well. And I think that's such a vital aspect of it, is actually if the musicians appear to be communicating with each other very strongly, then the audience connects with that, and that reciprocity, that reciprocal relationship really comes through, because you feel the mutual energy. They respond to you on stage communicating with each other, and then you respond to their reactions to that, and that's just so wonderful.
And talking of special gigs, you played the legendary Ronnie Scott's recently. What was that like?
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, to play somewhere where your idols have played is an amazing thing in and of itself. And we were so excited to do that back in January, knowing that it was going to be a gig that we would never forget. But I hadn't quite anticipated how packed it was going to be. It was pretty much full, and that was just made it lastingly special. And the staff were so lovely. So welcoming. We were made to feel so welcome there, and lots of people coming up and just talking about that audience interaction, talking about how they felt they'd been taken on a journey, and thanks. One person just came up to me and said, "Thank you for taking me all this way with you through your mind, and through how you feel." And I just thought I wouldn't get touching comments like that quite as regularly at an ordinary gig. It was just the whole night was just so special, and the audience was so engrossed, and it was absolutely wonderful. I would recommend Ronnie's to anyone, obviously, but I think it's from the point of view of playing there, it's almost unsurpassed, really.
Excellent. And are there plans to tour Forward Thinker as well?
Yes, no, absolutely. We have just played in Paris at the New Morning, which is fantastic. And also we did a big album launch party at the Pizza Express, Holborn in London on release day, May 27th, which is fantastic because we had special guests from the album involved, including trombonist Nathaniel Cross, trumpeter Jackson Mathod, and Charlotte, again, the vocalist from High Time. And so I've done 2 big album shows just as the album was coming out. It was a really fantastic thing. And we're doing some Scottish dates as well. So at the Jazz Bar, 1st of June, and Glasgow Jazz Festival on the 17th of June for the Blue Arrow. That's going to be a very special show. I'm going to invite some additional horn players down to that to make it a big sort of more festival-based gig. Peggy Skylight on July the 27th as well in Nottingham, and attached to UK dates are upcoming to that. So it's been interesting actually, because there's obviously the market's so oversaturated right now from the point of view of getting gigs. People whose bookings from 2020 are still getting honoured, means it's harder to get shows and harder to build up a tour, but it's going really well for us. And I think the fact that we played in Paris has just, added something extra special to that.
Absolutely, yeah. And how did you get into jazz? How did that become your kind of central type of music?
So my personal relationship with jazz goes right back to when I was even 2 or 3 years old, because my grandfather was a jazz trumpeter based down in Bristol. He's
Right.
part of the trad revival scene, and he ran a band called the Avon Cities. And I went to see him play from a very young age. I remember being in the Colston Hall when he was doing a sort of reunion gig for his band in 2000, and it might even be 99 actually. And I just remember seeing him playing his own compositions, but also doing really amazing arrangements of trad tunes and songs by the Beatles for jazz style, etc. Just as a 4-year-old, that had a really big impression on me, seeing my grandfather in a hall playing jazz. And it was just a wonderful experience, I think, to build my relationship with jazz off of, because my whole family was there. And my dad, picked up his love for jazz from my grandfather.
Okay.
We just gone to so many of his gigs throughout his life that it was always around me. But my dad introduced me to many of the records that I grew up to love. He got me into Herbie Hancock and Horace Silver and Miles, and just all the greats really he introduced me to. And then from there I did my own explorations in my teens into fusion and all, Yusuf Kamal and all the more modern stuff I discovered myself. But through jamming with my father in my mid-teens, just playing sort of the seeds of a lot of my ideas that would then develop into my career in music, I would just, I just came up with funk grooves, and I'd play keys and he'd play double bass.
Right.
And that was really the beginning of me actually playing jazz. And then, it was probably starting more in like a funk direction, but it very quickly moved more in a jazz direction just because of how much I was listening to. And from there, it developed into Jamboree, which was my funk fusion band at university, and it just grew from there really. So jazz has been in the family, music's in the family, and it's always been around me. It's in my blood, it's in my soul. So
fantastic! What a great story, Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Alistair. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And this is Nimbus Sextet and To the Light.